Okay, so we're welcome to a forum of the Champaign County League of Women Voters, and this is a forum for the vacancy of Judge Tom Difanis. Good evening. I am Tricia Crowley of the League of Women Voters, and on behalf of the NAACP, the League, the News Gazette, and Illinois Public Media, I welcome you to tonight's candidate forum. So tonight's forum is for the position of judge to fill the vacancy of Thomas J. Difanis. Because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we are unfortunately not presenting this forum in person, and consequently, we are not accepting questions concurrently with the forum. I urge you to submit your questions for this week's forums via email, phone, or directly from the form on our website. Our website is lwvchampaigncounty.org. And we have 2 more forums on Wednesday and Thursday night for county board races. Similar questions which have been submitted have been grouped together, and consequently your question may not be asked in precisely the way you submitted it. And due to limited time, we may not get to all of the submitted questions. After this forum, it will be available on the League's YouTube channel and also will be broadcast by UPTV. The UPTV schedule is available on the City of Urbana website. The video of this forum will also be available on the Vote Champaign website with the candidates' other information. So the order for candidates is alphabetical, and therefore Jason Baum, Republican, will open and Scott Lerner, Democrat, will close. Each candidate will be given 2 minutes for an opening statement. I'll then ask questions submitted prior to the forum, and the candidates will have 1 minute to answer those questions. At the end, each candidate will have 2 minutes for a closing statement. Candidates will kindly refrain from any negative attacks on the other and will speak only to what they plan to do if elected to office. And shall we begin? Mr. Baum, you may start your opening statement.
Thank you. And thank you to the League of Women Voters, the NAACP, the News Gazette, and Illinois Public Media for sponsoring this event. My name is Jason Baum, and I was appointed by the Illinois Supreme Court as a circuit judge in 2018. My appointment came after the Merit Selection Committee found me to be exceptionally well qualified for the position of circuit judge. Over the past 2.5 years, I've tried to serve the best that I can. I am the only candidate in this race recommended by the nonpartisan judicial bar poll, with 97% of the responding lawyers saying that I met the requirements for office. I'm running to remain a circuit judge. It's a job that I love in a community that I love. I love the job because I get to work towards helping people resolve their disputes peacefully in a court of law. I have sought over the past 2.5 years to make my courtroom a place where all people are heard and everyone is treated with the respect and dignity that we all deserve. I was honored to become a circuit judge. It is an honor to go to work with the task of trying to do the right thing. And I would be honored if the voters would support me to remain there. On a personal level, before becoming a judge and a lawyer, I was a high school math teacher and basketball coach. In each of my jobs, I have tried to use the hard work ethic that I gained by growing up on a farm in central Illinois. I'm the proud father of 3 boys, the grateful husband of my best friend, Caroline, and I'm looking forward to the discussion this evening. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. And Mr. Lerner.
Hello, my name is Scott Lerner, and I'm running for 6th Circuit Judge. And I also want to thank you for inviting me to this forum. I was born and raised in the 6th Circuit of Illinois, and I've raised my children here. I graduated from the University of Illinois College of Law and have been practicing law for 28 years. I've worked in both the public and private sectors, including for the Cook County Public Guardian's Office and for the Vermilion County Public Defender's Office. I've also had the felony and juvenile contract in Champaign County. I've had 2 articles published in the Illinois Bar Journal related to family law. And I've worked throughout the circuit at both the trial level and the appellate level. Experience is important, but it's not everything. A judge must listen. It has to treat people with respect and apply the facts to the law. I want people who appear before me to leave the courtroom knowing their positions were heard and considered. Justice should not depend on how much money you have or the color of your skin. Our system of justice relies on people being treated fairly and with respect. Not everyone will get what they want if they appear before me. Yet everyone should feel as though they matter. Sometimes courts seem like they're processing files, forgetting how they're impacting lives. I want to work for the people of the Sixth Circuit, and I hope you will consider me and give me your vote. Thank you.
Okay. And Mr. Lerner, we'll start with you. Can you describe your legal experience in some detail, if you please?
Well, as I said, I've had 28 years of experience. I've done most of everything. So I've had experience with criminal work, from felonies to misdemeanors. I've had experience in civil work. I do a lot of family law. I mentioned I worked for the Cook County Public Guardian's Office and had the juvenile contract through Champaign. So I've done abuse and neglect work. I've done juvenile delinquency cases. I've essentially, I've done in 28 years quite a bit of almost everything. So I've had appellate practice. I've done both criminal and civil cases. I think that pretty well covers it.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Baum.
As I said, for the past 2.5 years, my experience has been as a circuit judge. During that time, I think I've demonstrated that I have the integrity, legal knowledge, and temperament to continue to serve in that capacity. I believe the lawyers who have appeared in front of me have validated that belief. As a judge, I've presided primarily over civil matters, but I've also heard criminal cases, family law cases, and juvenile matters as a circuit judge. Prior to becoming a judge, I worked for the Department of Justice for 10 years. In that capacity, I was a trial lawyer. I served as the lead attorney on the Joint Terrorism Task Force, and I spent 3 years as one of 2 appellate attorneys arguing cases before the 7th Circuit in Chicago. Before that, I was in private practice doing both defense work and civil work. And before that, I was a clerk for a federal judge. And now I'm an adjunct professor as well at the University of Illinois.
Well, thank you. Mr. Baum, the Illinois State Bar Association rates candidates for judicial office. What was your rating and why should the public pay attention to it or not?
My rating was 96.8%, I believe. The Illinois State Bar Association submits input from lawyers practicing in the 6th Circuit. I had 131 lawyers rate me, and 97% rated me positively. I received over 95% on all of the categories, including integrity, impartiality, temperament, court management, sensitivity to diversity and bias. I think that the bar poll, kind of like using Yelp when you decide where to go to dinner, is a useful tool. It might not be a perfect tool, but when you get 97% out of 130, I think that's worth paying attention to. I also think that the results in this election, in this race and in the next race, show the nonpartisan nature of the poll, and I think that voters should give it the common sense it deserves.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lerner, the Illinois State Bar Association rates candidates for judicial office. What was your rating and why should the public pay attention to it or not?
Well, I can't remember what my specific rating was, but it was nowhere near as high as Mr. Baum's. But I don't think the public should pay much attention to it. And there's a couple reasons. Number one, it's a popularity contest among very few lawyers. So most people never fill out the bar poll. And most people aren't even members of the Illinois Bar Association to get a bar poll. And I want to make changes, and sometimes that is not very popular. So I don't believe there's much value to the bar poll, but obviously I will leave that to the public. But luckily, the public are the people voting for this. And I think that the people have a different view of things than a few select lawyers.
Okay, thank you. Start with Mr. Lerner. Please describe one instance in which you faced an ethical problem and how you resolved it.
Well, I think you sometimes face ethical problems in the practice of law where you have clients who want you to take a position that's unethical, or to call them as witnesses when you know they're not going to tell the truth. And I think that is an ethical problem that has come up a number of times. And the only way to resolve it is to say, look, you could hire another lawyer. If you insist on testifying, it's going to have to be truthful. So I think that's an instance.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Baum, can you describe one instance in which you faced an ethical problem and how you resolved it?
Sure, I think as a prosecutor, you're required to turn over every piece of evidence. And sometimes that means that investigators don't want you to turn over evidence that is favorable to the defense. But in every instance faced with that, I disclose the information. I think it's important that the truth in our court system wins out. And the only way to get to the truth is ethically, straightforwardly. I think the truth matters, and the truth needs to be on display in full view in the courtroom. And so that's how I resolved that ethical dilemma.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll start with you, Mr. Baum. There's been discussion lately about structural racism, especially in courts and policing. Do you think that such structural prejudice is present in our circuit courts? In what ways specifically, and how can you address it as a circuit judge?
I do think that structural racism is something that exists. The Illinois Supreme Court has recognized that it exists and has taken steps to eliminate it. I think racism, wherever it is found, needs to be rooted out and destroyed. It has no place in our court system. It undermines the worth, dignity, and value that every citizen should have in the courtroom. If you've ever seen a statue of Lady Justice, she's blindfolded, which means that justice needs to be served regardless of race, gender, wealth, or any other status that we might place on a person. I think judges need to be deliberate in their decision-making. There's an Illinois professor, Andrea Miller, who's done some great work on deliberate judicial decision-making, being slow and deliberate in your decision-making to make sure you're rooting out any unconscious bias that even the judge may or may not have. So I think those are ways to root it out. Okay.
Mr. Lerner, there's been discussion about structural racism, especially in courts and policing. Do you think that such structural prejudice is present in our courts? And in what ways specifically, and how can you address it as a circuit judge?
Well, first of all, I was a member of the Racial Justice Task Force in Champaign County. And I think we made, as part of that task force, a number of recommendations, some of which have been implemented. But yes, there's certainly the issue of racism throughout the system, in the sense that it starts with police officers. Sometimes they're more likely to search somebody or pull somebody over because of the color of their skin. I think the level of search is different. I think bond amounts tend to be higher for African Americans and sentences longer. So I think there's a lot of issues that need to be addressed and can be addressed by courts and by judges. Things like excluding jurors because of the color of their skin. Obviously, that's barred by the Constitution, but judges have to be able to enforce that.
Okay, thank you. And sort of following up on that question, some ideas which have been raised to include doing away with money bail, reducing sentences, especially for drug offenses, and reducing prison terms in general. And do you have any opinions on these issues?
Is that directed towards me or Mr. Bob?
Yes, Mr. Lerner.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with these prison terms are we're spending more money putting people in prison than it would cost to send them to college. And I don't think we could sustain that as a society. I think that there are other ways in dealing with that, and that prison should be a last resort. Drug court should be an earlier resort. Treatment, trying to make sentences where mental health and drug care are a part of those sentences. So I think that there is a lot of room, short of putting people in prison, to deal with nonviolent crime. Obviously, there are violent, dangerous people that need to be locked up, but most of them are not drug users.
Thank you. Mr. Baum, some ideas which have been raised include doing away with money bail, reducing sentences for drug offenses, and reducing prison terms in general. And do you have opinions on these issues or others?
With respect to the issue of money bail, our current system has two factors that we look at. That is, will a money bail guarantee the appearance of the defendant and keep the community safe? Whether that should be changed, I think, is a question for the General Assembly. Judges and judicial candidates can't comment in support or opposition to a specific policy, but I think it's important for judges to have the discretion to deal with the individual in front of them. I think it's very important that judges keep in mind that it's a human being in front of them. I think the more limitations there are on requiring certain things to be done reduces the discretion that judges have in dealing with the human being in front of them, and whether a community-based approach or restorative justice is appropriate. I think the more discretion judges have, the better that the system may function.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Baum, do you have any ideas about what can be done to provide better and wider access to the courts?
Yeah, I think the Illinois Supreme Court has made it plain that judges are to provide as much access to courts as we can. You may know that in Champaign County, we have a problem-solving drug court, which has helped people deal with their addiction issues outside of incarceration. We also have a mortgage mediation program, which I oversee, which requires every mortgage foreclosure case in our circuit or in our county to go through mediation where the bank and the homeowner are placed in the same room prior to going to court. We've seen great results in that the banks oftentimes are able to work out being repaid their loan, while at the same time homeowners get to keep their home, which is great for our community. I believe that we could expand our problem-solving courts, perhaps to include a mental health court. I know that other counties also have a veterans court, but I think providing access to justice can take place outside of the courtroom through mechanisms the courts can use prior to the expense of litigation.
Thank you. And Mr. Lerner, do you have any ideas about what can be done to provide better access to the courts?
I guess I would reiterate some of the things Mr. Baum mentioned as far as I think there are some benefits with the mental court or mental health court, with mediation. I think that sometimes it's difficult for people to pay the filing fees. They're becoming more expensive, and I think help in that regard based on income is important. We're doing that to some extent. I think we need to make online filing easier and more available to the average person. And I think some of the self-help desks work and the computer lab at the courthouse are helpful with that. Although with Corona, it's difficult to get a lot of people into the computer room. But I think all of those are ideas.
Okay, thank you. And could you tell us what you think the biggest challenge facing the court system today is? Mr. Lerner.
Well, it's a big question, and it's one that I'm not sure how to answer as somebody running for judge, because a lot of it would be dealt with through the legislature, through the law. As a judge, essentially, you're applying facts to law and trying to come up with good solutions. I think certainly some of the major problems we have are issues of racism. I think that is a major problem where people are protesting because they don't believe the justice system works. And I think we need to help build overall confidence in the system. And I think the way to do that is essentially one person, one case at a time, treating people with respect.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Baum, what is the biggest challenge facing our court system, in your opinion?
I think currently the biggest practical problem facing the court system is dealing with our current COVID pandemic that's impacted all of our lives in many different ways. But the court system is a place where we bring lots of people together often, and figuring out how to bring those people together while at the same time ensuring everyone's safety has challenges. Courts have to make sure that everyone's rights are maintained. This includes the right to a speedy trial and the right to confront witnesses. But those rights and keeping everyone socially distant and spaced presents some challenges. On the bright side, I think the courts this has forced the courts to become more familiar with the use of technology. We've increased the Zoom, WebEx, and telephone hearings. I've been a proponent of technology in the courtroom since I took the bench. I had the first electronic courtroom in Champaign County. And I believe that technology will help us face some of these pandemic issues and allow us to do things remotely, as we're doing tonight.
Okay, thank you. Although even tonight, we can see what the problems of dealing with technology are. In Champaign County, this is for you, Mr. Baum. In Champaign County, the judges, rather than the circuit clerk, has supervisory authority over the clerks in the courtroom. This is unusual in Illinois. Do you think the clerks ought to be returned to the authority of the elected circuit clerk?
I believe that the system that we have right now works well. I think allowing the judges to work in close connection with a courtroom clerk helps things to maintain efficiency, maintain a continuity, and the truth is when people work together, a level of trust. So I think that there are ways that we can function well with the courtroom clerks and the clerks for the clerk's office. I've had a great working relationship with them. I've worked well with making my courtroom an electronic courtroom, which I think reduces the burden on human beings to put things in the right file. If it's done electronically, when the lawyers file things, I think we can ease the burden. So I believe that our system functions well, and I would like to see it continue.
Okay. And Mr. Lerner, in Champaign County, the judges, rather than the circuit clerk, has supervisory authority over the clerks in the courtroom. This is unusual in Illinois. Do you think the clerks ought to be returned to the authority of the elected circuit judge, or circuit court clerk, sorry?
I think I would agree that the system does work fairly well the way it is, so I guess I would recommend the change, although there is some room for improvement. I have had cases, for instance, where I filed a notice of hearing with the clerk's office that was rejected because they were waiting to get a date from a court clerk and things like that. So sometimes the communications between the court clerk and the circuit clerk isn't always perfect, but I think the system generally works pretty well.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Lerner, and this is the last question before closing. Is there anything else that you want the voters to know about you when they consider who they should vote for?
Well, I think there's a lot, but I think one of the things they should consider is, I grew up in the Sixth Circuit of Champaign, or Sixth Circuit of Illinois. I grew up in Champaign. That my father went to law school here and stayed here. My brother is also a lawyer, although he's in the Chicago area, but also went to the University of Illinois. And I also went to the University of Illinois. I've got a lot of ties to this community. And I care about what happens to this community. And I think that I would be able to serve this community. So I hope that the people will consider all of that and give me their vote.
Thank you. Mr. Baum, what else do you think the voters should consider about you when they're considering who to vote for?
Yeah, I was not born in Champaign County. My parents didn't give me a choice on that, but I've chosen this community to live in. My wife and I love living here. This is the first place we lived following our marriage. This is where we've chosen to raise our boys, and I love this community as well. I would also want the voters to know that I'm deeply committed to an independent judiciary. I don't think that partisan politics has any place in judicial decision-making. I don't think favoritism or racism or anything else has any place in judicial decision-making. I think judges need to make independent choices. And I think that I've done that well over the last 2.5 years. And I think I'm well positioned to continue to do that with the voter support.
Okay, thank you. So we go to closing statements, and Mr. Baum, since you started, you get to start here.
Right. Thank you, and thank you again for the opportunity this evening. One of my favorite books is To Kill a Mockingbird. In fact, our youngest son's name is Atticus, and in that book, Atticus Finch in his closing argument says that there is one way in this country where all people are created equal, one human institution where the pauper is the equal of a Rockefeller, the simple is the equal of an Einstein, the ignorant is the equal of any college president. That institution is our courts. Now, our courts have their faults, as any human institution does, but our courts in this country are the great levelers. In the courts, all people are created equal. It's been my privilege to serve in the court system for the last 2.5 years, and I agree with that sentiment from To Kill a Mockingbird. To serve as a circuit judge has been an honor for me. In that capacity, I've been well rated for my integrity, impartiality, legal ability, temperament, court management, and sensitivity to diversity and bias. I have supporters across the political spectrum. I've been endorsed by the Trades and Labor Union in both Decatur and here in Champaign. I recognize that public service is a public trust. The Supreme Court trusted me when they appointed me as a circuit judge in 2018. They appointed me to do a good job. I think I've done a good job, and I would ask the voters to trust me to continue to do a good job. It is a job that I love and a job that I think I'm well suited for, and would ask for your support in this election. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Mr. Lerner.
Thank you. Again, I've grown up in this community, and it's funny, you mentioned To Kill a Mockingbird, because my son was at To Kill a Mockingbird at Central High School. And one of the things within that book and that play is you had the African-American community there show their respect for a lawyer who worked hard for them. And right now, I think we're in a situation where where the African-American community, not everyone, but a lot of people feel that they're not being treated fairly. And that is one issue that I feel strongly about. Another thing I want to bring up is, yes, I was born there, and it wasn't my choice either, but I was born here, I mean. I went to Washington grade school. I went to Edison Middle School. I graduated from Central High School. I then went to the University of Wisconsin and graduated in college in psychology there, but then I came back for the University of Illinois College of Law. I want to help build confidence in our legal system. And the way to do that, I think, is to treat everyone with respect. It's just sometimes you go to these long calls and you get the feeling that people don't believe they've been heard. And I want people to feel that they have been heard, that their opinions matter, that the court is going to treat them in the same way, whether they're rich or poor. And that's very important. And I believe that I can treat people with respect because I care about these people. So again, I would ask you for your vote.
And thank you both. And thanks again to the League of Women Voters, the NAACP, the News Gazette, and Illinois Public Media for sponsoring this forum. I'd also like to thank Judy Iverson, our timekeeper, for keeping us on time. And a very special thanks to Jonna von Behrens of the League, who has put this forum together. Just a reminder, it's not too late to register to vote. Information is available on the League website and the County Clerk's website. Please register and vote. Thank you. Good night.